respect their followers and not leaders. I don't really see why that's particularly bad. But secondly, we see that this stance on social issues are even have more weight than structural changes that we're trying to say. Largely because these are doctrinal changes, ladies and gentlemen. It's the doctrine which distinguishes the church from any other organization, like NGOs, for example, or any corporation, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, we do think that it's more spiritual than whatever structure that they're talking about. So if we're going to change or shift your stance with these particular things, it has actually, great resolve, or it requires great resolve or political will in the part of the priest. What it says simply is that the changing, its stance on marriage of the priest, it's something that can be easily done, and it would have much more impact, ladies and gentlemen, and it's not as controversial as the policies as other things like purgatory or probably abortion or what have you. But even if, for example, they say that it has greater weight, we think that allowing priests to marry shows that it will also have, showing that structural change is so massive, then it can only show to the public that it's willing to rock its structures in order to attract more followers and more priests, ladies and gentlemen, into the fold, which is a great thing because you're having more members, you're leading more people to salvation or what have you. So it's a good thing. It's a pronounced articulation of the progressive stance without attracting, which will attract progressives, ladies and gentlemen, which is a bigger member of society anyway in a globalized world. The responsible from negative side with respect to this conclusion that it will attract more people is to simply say, well, there will be a backlash coming from conservatives. What I'll tell you is that if there are people who are really conservatives, that they believe, ladies and gentlemen, in the tradition of the church, they also will respect the Pope anyway, in the authority which flows from tradition, ladies and gentlemen, members of today's debate. So we don't think that there's going to be a massive exodus or what have you, ladies and gentlemen, to begin with. But we think, therefore, that the converse of this is that you'll be able to attract more people into the fold, which is generally a good thing because the church is there to, save more people at the end to begin with. So before I move on, any points of information?
So you agree to the fact that amendments within any doctrine have a risk of reducing significant number of the believers from the start?
No. But the question is, we're going to get more people anyway. But even if, for example, there will be people who will be turned off, where are they going to go, right? You can't think of any more conservative organization out there, right? The other alternatives are actually more liberal compared to that of the Catholic Church. You have the Jesuits, for example, or the Opus Dei inside the Catholic Church. So I don't think that particular, argument or point of information would actually fly in today's debate. But before I move on to the second important issue, with respect to addressing political or clerical abuses, let me just address some minor points coming from their side of the house. The first thing that he said is that there will be some form of politicization. I'm not entirely sure where this came from, right? Because it sounds as if you have political parties inside the Catholic Church. They actually vote people sometimes based on several reasons. For example, regional representation or what have you, or probably the belief of the prison, whether or not the prison is progressive or whether or not the prison is coming from a Jesuit or an Opus Dei society. So it changes. But the thing is that you can't really determine, ladies and gentlemen, because these things are actually affirmed based on whether or not there's a smoke, white smoke which will come out after the voting. So the entire political process is completely, immune from any form of politicization that they're talking about today's debate. But more importantly, I'm not entirely sure what the conclusion of that argument is. But the second thing that they said, ladies and gentlemen, is the idea that it's not doctrinal anyway, right? I'm not entirely sure when the second speaker says that it didn't come from the Bible, which hurts them even more. Because if it did come from the Bible, if it's not doctrinal, then we can't easily change it. It's simply a mechanical structure which you can easily address to. And the only thing that he said is that it's not doctrinal, but the reason for which is because of private reasons. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot of religions which has, spiritual siddha. I always took a point, be reasonable. I don't know, people for example, the Ayatollah, ladies and gentlemen, having kids, right? Or probably the Baptist, ladies and gentlemen, allowing priests to get married. The point is that there's really no massive problem in terms of corruption. They can easily address these things by having checks and balances or what have you. But the second response to this is that we have things like the first family, for example, leading the entire state. And we don't think that just because you have an entire first family, or the wife of the president or what have you, that there will be a transfer of wealth from the state to these particular individuals. We think that checks and balances can be existent. Thirdly, you also have CEOs who have families, ladies and gentlemen, in corporate structures. This only shows that you probably need an accountant or probably like good mechanisms inside your structure to be able to ensure that corruption wouldn't happen. Moving on, the last issue that is debate, addressing the clerical abuse. Things that Colin talked about, no responses coming from their side. He's talking about a number of priests, for example, having sexual liaisons with people who can easily be silenced, i.e. the kids. So if you allow them to marry, firstly, you're going to have a platform for them to release their sexual frustration, and secondly, have wives, for example, who can easily police their sexual behavior and actually let the public know if something's happening or what have you, which can correct their particular behavior. And the expectation for them to be faithful is actually present. In that particular case, we do think that it might not be able to solve all problems in terms of clerical abuses, but the impact of it to clerical abuses will be severely decreased. Having said that, I think it's quite easy. We win today's debate.
Thanks, Go Whip, and I call it opposition whip.
The government team fails from the very beginning of this debate when they failed to recognize the differences between the Protestant Church and the Catholic Church. We were the ones that actually told you the unique identifications and the characteristics that Catholic churches possess. A centralized form of institution, certain doctrine, a certain idea of belief and traditional beliefs that has lasted for 2 generations, which is why it has so many powerful and advocate believers of the Catholic religion. What they push for will be a great argument for Protestant, why you should opt into a Protestant church where priests can get married and they can become models for those kind of Protestant believer families, right? We have absolutely no problem with that, but we're talking about the Vatican, the Catholic Church. And when they try to kind of like brainwash this entire debate as if we're talking about some sort of debate between Catholicism and Protestantism, we clearly take this debate home, right? So the justification as to why the Bible or the doctrine should be changed by the Pope is really weird. They say that there's a social progressive trend, right? If that is the case, that is a great thing for its believers. But when we're talking about the unique and exclusive identity of Catholic Church and the traditional ideas, they risk that entirely, and they actually conceded to the fact that these doctrines can be changed over and over and over again as the popes go on. And they have no problem with saying that, no, even with all those confusions and even with all those inconsistencies, believers will suddenly opt into this idea of Catholicism because the only unique benefit coming from them is now priests can become more like fatherly figures in families. First of all, I beg to differ because that's always not the case. Like for example, if you want that so much, you can always opt into Protestant churches. But second of all, the idea of love and its consummation of marriage and all those things, that's not the really quintessence of love itself. The quintessence of love is that you love your neighbors, not only your family, but your neighbors. And if that is the case, the priests in the status quo have no problem because they express a lot of community, public favors and love in those kind of churches and whatnot. So where's the trade-off that you want to go for, right? The idea about sexual abuse, clerical abuse, right? We believe that this is a, first of all, extremely new matter coming at like 6 minutes and 30 seconds from the whip from the very get-go. But even if that is the case, they have to provide to us why Protestantism and the fathers in those Protestant churches still commit the sexual abuses within their own unique churches, right? It's not a unique problem that is derived and caused by the idea of Catholic beliefs, right? I think I destructed most of their ideas and POIs. Seeing none, I'll go on. 3 clashes as to why we specifically have to take this debate home. First of all, the uniqueness of Catholic religion, because they have failed completely to differentiate Catholic religion from any other multiple examples that we were able to tell you, such as Japanese Buddhism or any other Protestantism and whatnot. Please sit down. Second of all, the practical harms. Their unique benefit was that now there's less chance for sexual abuses, and second of all, there's more, figures and models for, how to love your family, right? As if the current society is completely, utterly failing in those kind of aspects, right? And third of all, the social progression. They have a weird notion that Pope is suddenly going to change the entire notion of the Catholic belief, even though we specifically identify to you that Pope currently is from an extreme marginalized and minor branch in the Catholic Church itself. The government says that he has received 3 decades of Catholic religion, right? So we tell you, the way that we currently select popes is as this. Each branches have a certain archbishop, and they gather into a certain building, and you talked about pretty well, right? But the idea is, if a pope has that much power to change the doctrine and has that much influence over its believers, and more specifically the doctrine which has lasted for 2 entire millennia, then it loses its benefits in selecting minor branches. We told you about the politicization and the branch association that's going to happen in the future if this were the case, right? So what's going to happen is we're no longer going to see progressive figures such as Pope Francis, right? Because he's from a minor branch and has extremely progressive views that is currently against the idea of the entire Catholic branch. So whatever beliefs that you push for is, first of all, extremely minor. Second, it's going to be short-lived. And third of all, it's going to reverse as soon as Pope Francis dies and we have a new pope. That's at your best case scenario. First clash, right? First of all, we have to... Okay, what?
Firstly, there's such a thing as papal fallacy. So whatever his interpretations are considered to be doctrinal. Secondly, ecumenical letters are actually documented, which means they serve as jurisprudence for future popes.
Thank you for telling me things that I already know. So what? Still believe... I don't get their unique benefits, so they're saying that's going to be documented. Exactly, documents are going to be changed if we opt into your idea of popes. And I don't get the other part of your POIs, I'm just going to move on. Maybe my Bible to talk about it a little more. So the idea, my first clash is about unique Catholic religion, right? The centralized institution, and that is the very sole reason why people actually opt into Catholic religion in the very first place. People opt into it because it is consistent, because it has very clear messages, because the doctrine specifically tells you to act in a certain way. But if you don't really like that, it's not like the Catholic Church is actually imposing you and completely criticizing you for not following the Church's words like as it says, as if it's written in stone. Second of all, the idea that we have a consistent stance is the very quintessence of Catholic churches. The unique differentiation that I already have told you is the reason why people that the Catholic Church has so much political power in the very first place. Let's move on to the realistic damages that will actually be brought upon government's world. So it's going to lead to loss of believers because the spirit of Catholic churches is to be very consistent. Now they give room for amendments, right? They say it as if it's a good thing. They say that social progressions can only be from this idea and popes say this and that, right? That's not the case. Social progressions is a different thing from whatever popes recognizes. So it's different for a pope to entirely change the doctrine, as to say that priests can marry and whatnot, but it's also a different thing to recognize, for the Pope to recognize that there's a certain social trend. That's a different thing. That's why I've told you that differentiation between believers and priests. For priests, they are under the idea of doctrine that actually dictate the way they behave. For believers, it's a matter of choice. Third of all, the idea of social progressions. So what they're pushing for would be great if it were a top-bottom approach, right? I'm sorry, bottom-top approach. They give extremely radical examples such as slavery and this kind of sexism, or those kind of things and whatnot. But those things changed after generations of generations. The Pope did not suddenly come to the podium and say, okay, no more slavery, and then we're done. End of discussion. That is definitely not a realistic idea that has actually happened historically. Please don't be fooled by a ridiculous rhetoric of Pope having that much influential power as to end the slavery, right? So the idea that we want to bring to you, the trade-off that's going to be brought upon us, at their best case scenario, doctrines may become more malleable. Things can become a lot more flexible. But at our worst case scenario, what's going to happen is that maybe it's a little bit conservative, but at least we have the consistency. We don't lose our believers because of the inconsistencies and confusions that these believers will go through. So, again, proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thanks, Upwith, and I'll call on opposition reply speaker.
Mr. Speaker, there are 3 questions that you have to answer in order for you to win this debate. Number 1, is this a problem of conservatives nagging, like while that you are making these different individuals of the priests being capable of being married, or is it the problem of identity and the holy entire spirit that has been consistent within the Catholic Church? Second question, is this a problem of interpretation? Because what they're claiming is Holy Bible never said that, so you can actually do that. Is it because we believe, yes. Third question, does amendment risk the politicization within the Catholic Church or division among the believers? Number 1, is this a problem of the conservatives nagging or identity problem? Because we believe most of the cases of the Catholic Church believers already know or uphold the value of the love or family and so on and so forth. Simply as a claim, you have one more family, which is not guaranteed, by the way, to be a model family. It's going to increase and people will absolutely suddenly be more opting into the concept of the love and so on and so forth. We think that that's not necessarily marginally a good benefit compared to our side, but at the same time, we compare those apologies toward the LGBTQs and maybe different perspectives of the abortions are already very controversial within the different states. In other words, this is the cases of you actually having an opportunity upon whether this is a discrimination or not. In terms of the marriage, we think that in vast majority of the cases, it's a choices. Therefore, when amendments within the Catholic Church and their centralized system is not upon believers, but at the same time the centralized system in itself, we tell you that's the moment that you are stop being Catholic from the start. You are the one who are stop being identified as a Catholic Church, which has been consistent and at the same time powerful within the multiple nations. Secondly, is this a problem of the interpretation? Yes, Holy Script never said that you cannot marry as a priest. But what their first argument coming from the PM and DPM was mainly about, this is an interpretation issue, just like the Protestant cases. We tell you, this is a doctrine created internally within the Catholic Church because it helps them. Because it helps them breaking down the private property and illegal successions and privatization or politicizations, which is actually prevalent within the Japanese Buddhism and at the same time Protestants. So we tell you, yeah, whatever interpretations you might have, we don't